October 2020, we made history at the South Moreton Boxing Club by staging the world's first behind-closed-doors white-collar boxing show. We got over 10,000 views on the night across 103 countries. Now we're bringing the live rumble back, bigger and better than before. Follow the fighters in the build-up and vote on the night for your favourites. See all the thrills, spills and skills from the best in white-collar boxing, live and free at the KO Cup.
Okay, Peter, so just wanted to talk specifically about the Joyce Dubois fight at the weekend, how that played out. And then more importantly today, I want to talk about the aftermath for both fighters and where they go, particularly Joe Joyce. So obviously recapping on the fight, funny enough, we did pick it exactly right. It would be a Joyce stoppage kind of after round 9. And we had that capitulation from Dubois in round 10. Now, the fight itself, I thought was really interesting, really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm a big jab fan. I would say, and if you can't jab, you can't fight. This was a battle of the jabs. And, Joyce went out and really used a 2-inch reach advantage, that's all. But that jab was just firing all the time. Didn't let Dubois get set. And he took Dubois' jab away from him. He kept sliding around to his right, sort of getting away from Dubois' right hand while, just sort of getting outside his jab and then just peppering him with that jab all the time. And I think, that the jab was the big telling factor in here. And it was also the experience, I think, of Joyce. It reminded me a bit of watching Carl Thompson and David Haye in 2004, when Haye was the young hotshot who was knocking everyone out, came up against the experienced, seasoned Thompson, who just kind of soaked up the barrage. And it was just a look in the eye that Joyce had. And I thought he had it through that fight. The same thing Thompson had. Haye was hitting him with those big bombs, and Thompson was just like, do you know what? You're just a kid to me. And it just seemed to be like unimpressed. And I think that kind of broke Haye's heart. And obviously, in that fight, Thompson went on to win in the 5th round after Haye had thrown the kitchen sink at him and then got very tired. Thompson then just turned it on and took him out. And I think obviously a slightly different play out with this fight. But the same thing, Joyce just didn't seem bothered by those punches from Dubois. It didn't change his reaction. And that was the thing with Dubois. Unfortunately, with these young guys who bomb these guys out, everybody he's been in with goes back away from him because he's so dangerous, he's so strong, and he's so powerful with those punches, so they back off. Obviously, Joyce didn't back off. The first thing he did was come out and push Dubois back with that jab, a bit like Fury did against Wilder. And I think that maybe, slightly unsettled Dubois. And then, of course, he was hitting him with those shots, with those magnificent shots, connecting flush. And Joyce didn't even look bothered. He didn't stagger. He didn't change his tactics. He was just like, right, okay, like I say, you're just a kid to me. Right, let's get back on the jab. So, I think that broke his heart a bit. And obviously the ending, now looks like he's got a fractured orbital socket. So it must have been very painful, very difficult to see out of that eye. I think we've got to ask some questions about that. Again, I don't want to just go on about fights it reminded me of, but, Cotto in 2008 against Margarito took a knee after taking a fearful beating from Margarito and kind of took a long while to live that down in his career. He did eventually live it down, got revenge against Margarito. And it turned out Margarito had probably been fighting with loaded gloves in that fight, as he was later exposed against Shane Mosley. But, Cotto was heavily criticised for that. Dubois was criticised in the immediate aftermath for taking that knee. But you've got to wonder, he was showing distress in the corner, saying he couldn't see. And I know they were just trying to pick him up. And I heard them say at one point, you're in the fight game, mate. This is it. You've got to go out. But obviously, in hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, would have been better to pull that guy out. If he couldn't see, he was distressed. He wasn't going to push it. I know he was slightly ahead on the scorecard. So very difficult decision for the corner to make. But in hindsight, they'd have been better to pull their fighter out, let him fight another day, and let him maybe blame someone else for the stoppage, rather than obviously having to do that capitulation in the ring. But, he's a young guy. He's incredibly strong. He's a great prospect. As we said in the recording we did at the preview of this fight, I thought it was slightly too early for him, to go up against someone as seasoned as Joyce. I thought that people were overlooking Joyce's amateur experience, and really making him a 3-1 underdog, which I thought was completely unfair. And so we picked Joyce to win. I thought it was too soon for Dubois, and it turned out to be so. The problem, again, for him rebuilding as a young, strong guy, obviously he's going to go places, he's going to do things, but he's had that experience of moving up those levels, and those punches just bounce off certain people, They don't move people, so he's got to deal with that. He's also got to deal with the fact of that capitulation and that potential, I'm told it's a definite fracture to the orbital socket of his left eye. Now, Kell Brook was never the same after Golovkin fractured his eye socket. And, he was always worried about that. And again, it's going to be targeted. And the next time Joyce goes in with somebody who's a real contender who can really take the shots, he's going to say, one, he's going to target that eye. and two, he's going to say, I don't think Dubois got that, got the real grit when it gets heavy. Maybe that's unfair. We don't know the exact situations, but I think that's what he's got to contend with. But he's a young guy. He's a hugely exciting prospect. Hope he comes again. I mean, what I drew up earlier, the examples I drew up of what this fight reminded me. David Haye in his 11th fight against Carl Thompson lost, and look what Haye went on to achieve. Absolutely stellar. He learned from that, went on to achieve amazingly. Cotto, like I say, against Margarito, obviously went on, to erase that feeling of capitulation and show his guts and his brilliance in further fights. So it's all there for Dubois. But, moving on to Joyce, obviously really exciting. I do feel he's never had the rub of the green. I feel Joe Joyce should be an Olympic gold medalist. I thought he won that final in Rio in 2016. And if it had the rub of the green, which maybe Anthony Joshua did in his final in 2012, he should be an Olympic gold medalist. He's come up at a time when we have a surfeit of talent in the UK of amazing heavyweights who can dominate the world. I mean, when has that ever happened before? What's the luck of that guy? If we had this Joe Joyce coming through in the 80s or early 90s, we would be fating him. But as it is, we've got loads of them guys, so we just kind of overlook him. So, fair play to him for taking the shot, rolling the dice a bit, and it's come through for him. So where does he go now? Well, obviously he wants to knock on the door of Joshua Wilder, etc. But that's not going to happen immediately. As we've said before, those guys are kind of tied up with each other for the foreseeable. So where else is there to look? Well, Dubois was the number 2 WBO contender. The number 1 WBO contender is Alexander Usyk. He automatically became the number 1 after stepping up from the cruiserweight as WBO cruiserweight champion. And WBO champion at heavyweight is Anthony Joshua. So Usyk sits in the number 1 spot, and Dubois was in the number 2 spot. Now, Joe Joyce, having taken that victory, obviously should be in the number 2 spot. And what his team are saying is they would like to see Anthony Joshua stripped if he doesn't defend against Usyk, which he's not going to, because he's going to fight, he's hopefully going to fight Fury early next year. So they're saying, let's get Joyce Usyk on for the WBO belt. Now, I think that, I think Usyk Joyce, it's difficult to say one after the other, is a fantastic fight, and I really want to see it. And I'm going to go through the reasons why I think it might happen. But I don't think it's going to happen for the WBO. The reason being, the WBO, like all these sanctioning bodies, are a business. They make their money by charging a percentage of the fighter's purse. So they could strip Joshua and abide by their rules, hand the belt or ask for the belt to be fought for between Usyk and Joyce. And Usyk and Joyce would probably earn maybe $500,000 each for that, and the WBO would get 3% of the purse. Joshua looks like he's heading into a mega clash with Fury early next year, where his purse is going to be 50, 60 million, and they could get 3% of that. So what are you going to do? They're going to hang on. And if anybody says, oh, no, that's the WBO's rules, look at the perennial number 1 contender, Dylan White, you know what I mean? And, never got defended against by Wilder. So they're going to look where the money is. So I don't see that happening. But I think this is a great fight for both guys. If they want to stay active and they want to stay relevant, I think it's attractive for both guys. Obviously, Joyce would love to fight Usyk. It's a step up for him, would make him the WBO number 1 mandatory. It's another big name on his record. He's in a hurry. He's 35 years old. He wants to get on, and Usyk would be a great name. They do have history. They fought in 2013 when Joyce was part of the Lionhearts team. So, and he lost on points to Usyk in that fight, but it was a close fight. It was, it was a really good fight. I mean, as we would have thought, Usyk used his fleet of foot and his speed to kind of outwit Joyce. And, in his stellar amateur career, and he was much more experienced at that time, although obviously a slightly smaller guy. But, so they do have that history. But, you'd fancy that again. I mean, Joyce was in no way outclassed. So, and now, it's a bit different. I mean, Joyce is bigger. Again, he's a bit more experienced on the pro stage. So, that would be a great fight for him and a great fight to take. And Usyk now has a name in the UK. He's fought Chaz Witherspoon at heavyweight, and then he's fought Chisora. So, and Usyk may be looking at that. To recap, Joyce must got to fancy that because he's a much bigger guy. He's going to say, if Usyk can't get Chisora out of there, he's going to do nothing to me. These shots are going to be like firing peas at a tank. It's going to be, I can do what I like. I can move in. I can look to land those heavy shots. Let that right hand go after that lovely jab. Keep on the end jab. So Joyce has got to fancy this fight. Usyk, on the other hand, may be looking at it thinking, do you know what? This is what I need. Because they're saying you didn't dominate Chisora, too effectively. Chisora's a short heavyweight, in a way a bit tailor-made for Usyk and his footwork. Joyce is a big guy. Joyce is 6'6", 18.5 stone. So when Tyson Fury says, no, I'll beat Usyk with one hand tied behind my back, and you can choose which hand, and Joshua says he's not interested in fighting Usyk, too small. Well, if he beats Joyce, then he's in the land of the giants, isn't he? You know, he's beaten a real genuine 6'6" guy who can punch, who's got an incredible chin, and he's obviously already beaten him. So I think it's a good fight for Usyk, and Usyk's got to fancy it because of the speed. You know, Joyce showed more head movement than he usually did in this fight against Dubois. That was a surprise. You know, and Dubois didn't move his head very much, you know, and kept catching that jab. So we thought it was going to be the other way around. But, you know, he isn't the fastest of punchers. We've talked about a load of his attributes, Joyce, but he isn't that fast, whereas Usyk is very fast. So he may well fancy that. He may well think, look, I can outbox this guy easy for 12 rounds. I can stake my claim, like I say, move it to the land of the giants, show I can deal with these guys of Joshua's stature. And, you know, and that will cement the idea that I should then fight Joshua, another 6'6" guy. So I think the fight makes sense for both guys. I don't think it's going to be for the WBO belt, but I just really hope they can get it on. I don't really see a lot that's as attractive to the fans, has the name recognition out there. They both want to get on. They both want to move on quickly. You know, Father Time is knocking at both of their doors, as it's not a Daniel Dubois. So they need these slightly risky fights, and this is a perfect fight. You know, they fought in the amateurs. They know each other. Joyce has moved on. Usyk's moved on. You know, I think the victory would mean a lot for Usyk to prove that he can deal with the big guys. The victory would mean a lot for Joyce that he can beat the name guys, not just the guy coming up. So there's a lot on the table, and it's winner takes all. So let's just hope they get it on and, you know, take the gamble. And you know what, with these guys, I think they will. So I'm really looking for Joyce Usyk next year to cement themselves as the #1 contender.